The corridor clock said it was late, which meant nothing aboard the station except that the lights had shifted to their softer cycle, and the gravity stuttered every 9 minutes like it was clearing its throat. I was kneeling beside an access panel, arguing quietly with a diagnostic screen that insisted nothing was wrong, while coolant dripped onto my sleeve in steady disagreement. I told the screen it was lying. It told me with admirable confidence that I was underqualified. That was when I noticed the silence behind me, the kind that only happens when someone is watching and hasn't decided whether to speak. I turned, expecting a supervisor or a security drone with a personality module stuck on disappointed. Instead, there was a child standing there, too still for her age, eyes fixed on the mess of tools scattered around my knees. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The station had a way of funneling the curious toward broken things. "You shouldn't be back here," I said, immediately aware that I had no authority over anyone, least of all children who wandered where they pleased. She tilted her head, long ears shifting with the movement, and I felt the familiar hitch in my thoughts where my brain tried to reconcile the almost human with the unmistakably alien. The ears were elegant, expressive in ways I didn't understand, and currently angled in a way that suggested interest rather than fear. "I'm fixing something," I added, because that seemed important to clarify. The diagnostic screen chimed, offended. She took a careful step closer, peering at the glowing symbols. I wondered if they meant anything to her or if she just liked the colors. Kids liked colors. Species didn't matter there. "Is it broken?" she asked. Her voice came through the translator embedded in the corridor wall, a half-second delay smoothing unfamiliar sounds into something close enough to language. The phrasing was odd, like she'd learned it from instruction manuals. "It's thinking about being broken," I said. "Which is worse? Broken things are honest." She considered that. Her ears flicked. I tried not to stare and failed in a polite, sideways way. The station hummed, a deep vibration that settled into your bones if you stood still long enough. I was suddenly aware that I'd been kneeling too long, and that my knee joints were filing a formal complaint. She crouched down without asking, movements precise, balanced, and reached out toward a loose bolt. I gently intercepted her hand before it could disappear into the machinery. "Sharp," I said, "and hot, and possibly cursed." "What is cursed?" she asked. "When something breaks in a way that makes you question your life choices." She nodded solemnly, as if this explained a great deal about the universe. Her gaze drifted to my pocket, where the faint outline of a small object pressed against the fabric. I'd forgotten it was there. A ridiculous thing, really, something I'd picked up from a trade kiosk because it reminded me of a simpler time when entertainment involved pressing a button and being delighted when something happened. Her eyes widened just a fraction. Her ears lifted. I sighed, because resistance felt pointless and because the station had already won enough arguments for one night. I pulled it out and held it up. The toy blinked, emitted a cheerful whir, and projected a tiny constellation of shifting lights that rearranged themselves when you shook it. "It's old," I said defensively. "Don't judge me." She didn't. She stared like I'd just unfolded a secret. "It moves," she said, very astute. "Can I?" She stopped, glancing up at me, ears tilting back in what I guessed was uncertainty. "May I hold it?" I hesitated for exactly the amount of time it takes to make a bad decision feel inevitable, then placed it in her hands. She handled it carefully, as if it might decide to escape. When it responded to her touch, lights blooming and shifting, she made a sound the translator struggled with, finally settling on something between laughter and surprise. "That's it," I said. "That noise, that's why people have children." She shook it experimentally. The constellation scrambled. Her ears fluttered wildly and she laughed again, this time without restraint. The sound echoed down the corridor, bright and strange and completely out of place among the pipes and panels. I realized then that I was smiling, and that this was probably another violation of protocol I didn't know existed. "Keep it," I said before I could reconsider. Her head snapped up. Keep. It's yours, I have others. This was a lie. I had none. But I also had a strong sense that if I tried to take it back, something fundamental would break, and not just in the coolant system. She clutched it to her chest, eyes shining, ears held high in a posture that felt important. Thank you, she said slowly, carefully, like the words were fragile. Don't mention it, I said. Seriously, if anyone asks, I didn't give you anything. I am a ghost. A very boring ghost. Footsteps echoed somewhere nearby, adult footsteps, purposeful. The child's ears snapped toward the sound, then back to me. I must go, she said. My mother. Understood, I said, standing too quickly and knocking my head against an overhead strut. The diagnostic screen beeped in what I swear was laughter. Go, before I get in trouble for existing. She hesitated, then reached out and did something unexpected. She pressed the toy gently against my chest, just for a second, then pulled it back and turned to run. Her laughter trailed behind her, mixing with the station's hum until it was gone. I stared after her for a long moment, then looked down at my empty hands. Well, I told the diagnostic screen. That happened. The screen responded by finally acknowledging the coolant leak, as if satisfied that I'd learned my lesson. I went back to work, tools clanking, thoughts drifting, unaware that the station had quietly noted the exchange, filed it away, and marked the time. I was halfway through reheating something that had once been labeled food when the door chimed in a tone I'd never heard before, a polite sequence that somehow implied both patience and authority. The heater shut itself off in what I interpreted as self-preservation. I stared at the door, then at the heater, then back at the door, mentally scrolling through everyone who might want to see me, and coming up with a list that was both very short and deeply concerning. Maintenance is off duty, I said to the door, because the station had excellent hearing and terrible boundaries. If this is about the coolant incident, I was framed by a pipe. The chime sounded again, slightly different, as if it had listened and adjusted its expectations of me downward. The translation panel lit up. A voice followed, smooth and measured. Threaded with harmonics, the software struggled to flatten into something comfortably human. I request a private exchange. That narrowed it down to 0 people I knew. I opened the door slowly, already composing an apology for whatever I'd apparently done. She stood there alone, posture composed, eyes steady, long ears rising above her hair in a way that made my brain insist on cataloging angles instead of panicking. The corridor lights reflected faintly in her eyes, and for a moment the station felt very small. You're early, I said, immediately aware that I had no idea what I meant. I arrived at the appropriate interval, she replied. Her ears shifted, subtle but deliberate. The translator hesitated, then added, You may close your mouth. I complied, sorry, reflex. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the door sealing behind her with a sound that felt final. My quarters suddenly seemed inadequate, cluttered with tools, spare parts, and the lingering smell of reheated regret. She took it in with a glance that missed nothing and judged nothing, which somehow felt worse. I am here regarding my offspring, she said. That tracks, I said. I mean, yes, I figured. Not that I was expecting, well, I was expecting nothing. This is more. Her gaze fixed on me, curious rather than accusatory. You appear distressed. Only internally. Externally I'm very calm, like a pond that's on fire. One ear flicked. The translator rendered it as a pause. You gave her an object. I did, I said quickly. A toy, completely harmless, certified, probably. It lights up but only emotionally. She slept with it, the woman said. Oh, I said, that's nice. She does not sleep with objects. I waited for the part where this became bad. She declared it a guardian star. I exhaled. That sounds less bad. It is significant, she said. Among my people, objects are not assigned roles lightly. She believes you entrusted her with protection. I gave her blinking plastic, I said weakly. Her lips curved just slightly. The translator hesitated, then aloud. Intent outweighs material. I shifted my weight, suddenly aware that my chair was blocking the only clear path through the room. I nudged it aside with my foot. So, you're here to retrieve it. Confiscate me, thank me, study my brain. I am here because you acted without expectation of return, she said. That is uncommon. I wasn't expecting company either, I said. Yet here we are. She regarded me for a long moment, ears slowly lowering into a position that felt intimate despite my complete ignorance. Gratitude among my kind is given privately. Public acknowledgement creates obligation. That makes sense, I said. Humans usually just clap awkwardly and hope no one makes a speech. She glanced at a stack of spare parts. You live simply. That's generous, I said. I call it strategically minimal. Silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, just present. The station hummed. Somewhere, a gravity panel hiccuped. She took a step closer, close enough that I became acutely aware of the space between us and how little of it there was. My daughter laughed, she said quietly. That is rare. I nodded. She has a good laugh, strong lungs. Her ears lifted, then relaxed. You altered her perception of humans. Hopefully upward. Neutral, she said. Then after a pause, curious. I felt something loosen in my chest. That's the best I can offer. She reached into a pouch at her side and withdrew a small device, organic in shape, faintly luminous. This records memory impressions, she said. I wish to offer you one. I blinked, like a souvenir. Like a moment, she corrected, if you accept. I hesitated, then nodded. As long as it doesn't explode. It will not, she said, unless you experience extreme regret. That's a risk, I admitted. She activated it. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to soften, the station's hum folding into something warmer. Then it passed. She withdrew the device and secured it again. Our exchange is complete, she said. Oh, I said, that's it. For now. She turned toward the door, then paused, her ears angled back toward me. You may keep the guardian role. I laughed, a short, surprised sound. I'll do my best. She inclined her head, then left, the door sealing behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing, then at the heater which cautiously powered back on. Well, I said to the empty room. I think that went well. The heater made a noise that could have been agreement. The station changed its behavior after that, not in any way that could be logged or reported, but in the subtle manners that only people who lived inside machines long enough ever noticed. Doors opened a fraction faster. Lights lingered a second longer before dimming. The gravity stopped clearing its throat quite so often. I told myself this was coincidence, which was my favorite explanation because it required no follow-up. The memory device sat on my workbench for 3 days before I worked up the nerve to activate it again. I passed it each morning, nodded to it politely, and pretended it wasn't quietly existing in my personal space like a thought I didn't want to finish. On the 4th day, I knocked over a mug, spilled something that was technically tea but emotionally questionable, and decided this was clearly a sign from the universe to stop procrastinating. All right, I told the room. If you rewrite my personality, I want it known I objected verbally. The device warmed in my hand, responding as if it recognized reluctance as a valid state of being. When it activated, it didn't overwhelm me. It didn't flood my senses or hijack my nervous system the way holodramas suggested it should. Instead, it offered impressions, gentle and precise. A sense of height, of perspective from someone accustomed to watching more than participating. The echo of a child's laughter layered with something deeper, relief maybe or astonishment, trust raw and unguarded. I sat down hard on the edge of the bunk, laughing under my breath. You could have just said thanks, I told no one. After that, things escalated in a way that felt inevitable in hindsight. Word spread, not officially, not through announcements or bulletins, but through the same quiet channels everything important traveled on the station. The alien child began waving at me in corridors, proudly displaying the toy, now adorned with symbols etched by her own hand. Other children followed, curious, then bold. I became the human who fixes things and gives stars, which was a wildly inaccurate job description but not the worst I'd ever had. Her mother returned, not always alone now, but always intentionally. Sometimes we spoke. Sometimes we sat in companionable silence while the station's artificial day cycled around us. Humor became a shared language where translation failed. She learned human sarcasm faster than I learned ear posture, which felt unfair but on brand. One evening, as the station drifted between systems and the viewport showed a spill of distant light that made everyone quieter, she told me why kindness mattered so much to her kind, how scarcity had shaped them, how generosity without expectation was considered a form of courage. I told her humans had mostly stumbled into the same conclusion after trying everything else first. "You are less chaotic than expected," she said. "Give it time," I replied. The guardian role became real in ways I hadn't anticipated. I advocated. I listened. I fixed things that weren't technically broken yet. When a minor diplomatic issue arose over shared resources,